Hello.
We've both seen a lot of films recently, and it's a delight in many ways actually to talk about two films that are getting a lot of attention at the moment.
And
And we
both
start,
British.
yeah, and we start with, if we may, with
Hello,
I've always
Irish,
thought
really.
Father Ted or Tarkovsky, which is an interesting thought. This is in relation to Martin. Is it Martin Donner or Martin McDonagh? I never know, but um, the
It's Martin
Banshees
McDonagh.
of yeah, and it's the Banshees of Inisherin, and this. Well, I'll let you introduce it.
Inisherin. It's the Banshees of Inisherin, not Ed
Inisherin,
Sheeran.
yes, not Banshees of Ed
Yeah,
Sheeran. No,
that's it.
absolutely not.
No, no.
Yeah, I love the thought that it's a pretty brilliant film, but it's still flawed. I have yet to see it. I'm really looking forward to it, and I've loved the trailers for it, and obviously the reviews have been. I don't want to use the word supportive, but have loved the chemistry that's there from before and has been back on screen again between two great Irish actors. So over to you, Graham.
Well, it's been billed as a sort of black comedy
Yes.
set in a very small island off the coast of Ireland in 1923 during the Civil War in the south of Ireland. But it isn't really a black comedy, even though it has black comedy in it. And the black comedy is very good black comedy. It's not any of those things. It's actually a perverse love letter to Ireland itself.
Mm.
And it's a perverse love letter because it shows up, and the whole point about it, I think, is to show how the very Irish character flaws are very damaging to the people on the island, but they're intrinsically part of being Irish. And that's the message that comes across by the end. So even though it starts off one way, you think, oh, it's just a sort of like period drama set in this cute sort of Father Ted community, and there's a lot of ficking going on. There's a lot of like, there's a witch, there's a stone cottage, there's a stone cottage where you've got like animals occasionally living in it as well. You've got the bar, you've got the people playing fiddle in the bar. So it ticks all the Irish boxes, and you think, oh, it's good in this direction. And then you eventually realise it's actually an allegory. And it's really about Ireland, and it's really about the Troubles. Really, it's really about the supposedly. I mean, I'm not Irish, so I wouldn't make definitive statements, but supposedly it's about the deep nature of the flaws that lead led to the Troubles. And it's quite pessimistic in that way, and that's why eventually it ends up pitch black. It goes from dark comedy to being almost pitch black drama. So it's not a happy ending. I'm not going to tell you what happens, obviously, but it doesn't. You end up thinking like, well, that was a brilliant film, proper film, great script, great acting. They do not make films like that anymore, especially not British.
No, I mean the starting point is a renewal of Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell performing together as they did in Bruges, and they have been friends with a routine for year upon year upon year, and then and the older man, obviously Gleeson, the younger man Farrell, and as I understand it, Gleeson suddenly says that's it. He just cuts the friendship dead.
Yeah,
there and then.
He sort of decides that the Farrell character is just dull, and that it's time in his life. Brendan Gleeson decides that he must stop having these dull, repetitive conversations in the small island, doing the same thing over and over again, and all very parochial. And it is shown to be very parochial in a sort of friendly but quite quietly nasty way. The Irish policeman's particularly nasty in it. But he decides he just wrote this one time where he wants to write some new songs on his fiddle, and he wants to like experience life more fully. And he cuts off Farrell dead, which obviously Farrell cannot understand. And Farrell's not quite as smart as Gleeson. But it's nothing like in Bruges, the last film we did together, which was also a Martin McDonagh film. And in Bruges is a very weird mix of crime thriller and sort of like, it's a bit like an American film except set in Belgium with Irish and British characters. Whereas this is thoroughly Irish and thoroughly British, and it's very much like a play. It's written like a play, really. And it could be a play. And
In
it's
terms of
not like his previous films, like Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Seven Cypress, stagey, but beautifully filmed. So you might not be aware it's stagey because it looks like a film, but the script is very, very. You could be reading it in a book of a great play. And so the annoying thing about it to me is that the lesser characters come across as living and breathing people. I think there's the sister of Colin Farrell, who's very good, played by Kerry Condon, and the idiot son of the terrible policeman is played by the brilliant, I always forget his name, is it Barry Kerrigan? It might be. Well, anyway, he's fantastic. Barry Kerrigan, if I've got his name correct, which I probably haven't, it almost steals the film as the idiot brother. His facial contortions as he's trying to ponder all the mysteries of daily life are just amazing. And although Gleeson and Farrell are both great, it's like watching two heavyweight Shakespearean actors on stage face to face, except in Ireland in a film in the real world, because it's clearly all shot on location, not in the studio. But although they're brilliant, because the film is basically a parable and an allegory, eventually you realise that even though you're fascinated by the performances, you don't really believe them as characters. You know you're watching Farrell. You know you're watching Gleeson. Whereas the smaller characters are totally believable. You don't think they're just acting. You think these are real people. I never truly believed in either person. I just thought these are two-star actors playing good roles with a great script in an allegorical film about the meaning of Ireland. And I never got past that. So at the end, when it got more depressing, that took away from it from me. I thought that he was so determined, Martin McDonagh, to produce a very brilliant play as a film that it ended up, in my mind, despite its stunning visuals and brilliant direction. The whole film's great. It's a bit more of a play than a film, and it made me self-conscious of what I was watching. So that's why.
That's interesting. Because if you were to take it into the theatre and not have celebrity actors in it, would actually that made it a more satisfying piece. And just on that name, it's Barry Keoghan, or
it's Keoghan,
Ghan.
That's it. Well, he's fantastic.
He is McDonagh. I've checked him up. He is McDonagh.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that because his younger brother is actually John Michael McDonagh? It is. He made Calvary. Actually, this film is much more like Calvary, which had Gleeson and Dylan Moran in it. This is more like Calgary than it is like Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. But yeah, you're right. On stage with lesser known actors, the staginess wouldn't be a problem, and it would completely work.
I mean, that's an interesting dilemma, isn't it, for celebrity actors? I'm thinking of, for example, the partnership between Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart doing Waiting for Godot. And you would go to see Waiting for Godot to see Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen in it.
Yeah.
So you do want to see them, and you want to go and see this film for who's in it. So there's the catch.
Well, now, on stage,
you don't. Then? Is that a director's failure?
No, it's this. On stage, there's an element of you're watching a play. So the joy of watching McKellen and Stewart on stage is there, despite the fact they're only actors. In a film, as I've said many times before, you have to suspend your disbelief in a film to truly enjoy it. You have to stop being aware it's a film and get caught up in the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's such great actors. Eventually, because the plot's so allegorical, I don't think the characters are given enough to do, really. Ultimately, because he's intent on reaching a certain destination. The director and the writer, Martin McDonagh,
does it become a bit grandstanding?
No, not at all. No, they're not over the top. It's just they need more. They need more things to happen. I mean, basically, you could tell the story of what happens in about one sentence or a sentence and a half.
Which
it's
I
basically
did without seeing the film.
It's a short story. It's not a novel.
No.
You couldn't make the film a novel. It's a short story. And I think that's why I didn't 100% buy it, even though it was a great film. It was a bit, but it was like Tarkovsky's The Silence. I'm a big Tarkovsky film fan, the late Russian director, and I love Solaris and Stalker in particular, and Ivan's Childhood. But his final film in the 80s, The Sacrifice, I nearly walked out of the Edinburgh Film House when I saw it there at his Scottish premiere, because it was so allegorical. I just couldn't care less. I couldn't care less about the characters.
No.
I just thought this is a bit pretentious, actually. And the Banshees of Inisherin isn't as pretentious as The Sacrifice, but it shares quite a lot of attributes with it. Except it's as if Father Ted if Father Ted had slept with the sacrifice, you would end up with the Banshees of Inisherin.
Well, on that note, and you've just touched briefly there on the Edinburgh Film House, we should do an update on the latest situation, just to remind the listeners that the Edinburgh International Film Festival, the Edinburgh Film House Centre of Moving Image, made the decision that to do immediate closures with immediate effect, redundancies with immediate effect, with the debts that both were facing. And just if you've got any news for us, Graham, really, as to what's happening now. This is maybe a couple of weeks later.
There hasn't been much progress in the campaign. There was a bit of a campaign, and Mark Cousins, the next Edinburgh National Film Festival director and renowned documentary filmmaker, who we both know personally because of the film festival.
Yeah.
He was leading a sort of like Twitter trial. Quite a lot of it. He's such a busy man. There's no way he could possibly lead a campaign, because I mean, about a week after he started that, he was in Rome, and for some film festival, and he'll be off somewhere else for another film festival. He's always making films, so he's not really a man to do it.
No.
But I wouldn't hold out that much hope, because even though potentially you'd think, well, there must be a demand for the film festival and the film house, must be. Well, apart from the problem of the economic crisis Britain's facing, the other problem is that Scotland's actually a poor country. So, for example, the Glasgow School of Art, which is Charles Rennie Mackintosh's masterpiece, which is world renowned, when it burnt down for the second time, which I think was about 7 or 8 years ago, there was all the talk at the start in the first year about it being rebuilt. As far as I know, it's not even talked about now. There's been absolutely no progress I can discern about rebuilding the Glasgow School of Art. Now, what country in the world would let a masterpiece like that just lie there derelict and burnt out without making serious efforts to recreate it? So for that reason, even though technically you think, well, the film house must come back, the film festival must come back, Scotland is not a rich country in general. So, the jury, I'm not totally hopeful. There's a chance for sure, but
I mean, I noticed they've had a vigil outside, which got some coverage, obviously, but this is going to come down to finance, isn't it? And as you say, if the Scottish government doesn't have the money available, then there's a problem, clearly.
Exactly, and as you know,
and giving money to the arts doesn't always play well, particularly in times of straitened times when it would be seen that actually, is that something that's, I mean, I perish the thought of ever calling it a luxury, but by comparison with social service needs, education needs, etc., maybe it would be seen as, can you justify giving that money as opposed to supporting people in crisis? It's a difficult.
It isn't just that; it's a perpetual situation, because I saw recently figures about how much of public spending goes on which particular sectors, the economy or defence or the arts, etc., the NHS, and in the lowest tier of spending was the arts, and that's in normal times. In normal times, the arts, percentage-wise, gets some of the lowest budgets of all the sectors of British society. So if that's what happens in normal times, you can see that in bad times, there's even less reason why they're going to spend lots of money in the arts.
Yeah. So we're sounding gloomy on that. Let us hope that
semi-gloomy. I'd say semi-gloomy.
Okay. Well, briefly, Graham, just the album which we've talked about before it even coming out. We've mentioned Arctic Monkeys playing at Leeds Festival, and now the car is out. The car is motoring. It's in first gear, out on Friday. And this will take the form of, if you like, Graham, it must be time for an interruption.
Oh, yeah, well, basically, I've got the car already. It came out on Friday. Straight in the forecourt, no messing around. Got straight in gear, slapped it on the road.
Yeah.
And it's actually a very good album, based of 3 listens. And in terms of like the Arctic Monkeys fan base, which I saw in action at Leeds Festival, in a huge crowd, all of whom wanted all the big hits from the first 2 albums and from AM, and they didn't really want anything else. Well, I would say that the hardcore, large base of Arctic Monkeys fans will like this album slightly more than they like the last one, Tranquil's Hotel and Casino. It isn't quite as obtuse as hip hop, with Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, and his Pet Sounds era. It doesn't try that. It's much more. It's slightly 70s, slightly loose. It's got nice strings. It's got nice 70s guitar. There's a little bit of funk going on occasionally, not very often, but occasionally. So all in all, it's a much nicer album to slap on in the background at a party. And I'm sure they could play 2 or 3 tracks from it at that gig, and the fans wouldn't throw tomatoes at them. But it's still not going to please your proper Arctic Monkeys fans who loved AM. But it does sound like a great album to me. It's definitely a more pleasant listening experience than the previous one.
Which was one that I struggled with for those reasons. I will get the car maybe when it's when the moment comes. And well, I wonder first of all why it's called a car. Any explanation for this? I mean,
well, if you look at the slave
object.
Well, if you look at the slave, there are no photographs of the band. For the first time, there's no band photographs, even in the booklet. The booklet is just the lyrics. There's no band photograph on the sleeve itself. And there's only one photograph full stop. And the front cover is just a photograph, no sign of the band's name. And it's a picture taken from above, off the top of a building. Looks like an office block building. And there's one white car parked on top of the office building, but it's in the shadow of other taller office buildings, obviously in a city. And the little white car is on its own, and it's not doing anything. And it looks slightly, it's like the picture, which is actually a photograph taken by Matt Held as the drummer, but the picture looks like sort of like Edward Hopper transposed to Leeds. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I was trying to discern some meanings. At first I thought, well, the car must be about modern society and how the car's taking everything over, but the car's also led to problems with climate change. So it's probably some comment to society, but the actual lyrics of the title track, The Car, are about him as a small boy going on holiday. And it's not a proper holiday till you have to fetch something from the car. But is that what's really about? Because the thing about Alex Turner as he's got older is his lyrics have got more enigmatic. He's still got his sense of humour. He's still got a little bit of pithiness, that little bit of quirkiness. But there's a lot of like enigma going on. What does he really mean? And it sort of comes out in the front cover, the photograph of that little car. What does it mean? And
looking at that cover, you can see wheelies, as it were. You can see rubber tires. Burning tires. So there's a sort of story that you can build there.
Well, I thought there was, but I thought first, well, perhaps because the tire marks are in a circle, it's about a car going nowhere. Yeah. So it's about society going nowhere. But you can't really see that from what the cover is. So I rejected that stupid idea. But then I thought, okay, the car is dwarfed by the buildings. The car is isolated. The car is on its own.
Yeah.
And because it's a car, it can't really feel. And if there's someone inside it, we can't see if there is or not. If there's someone inside that car, they're not part of the world properly because they're inside the shell of this little car. And since a lot of his lyrics are still about how disorientating and false and fake and weird it is to be famous, which is still his major theme these days, perhaps the car is Alex. Perhaps the car is Alex isolated and on his own and a bit cut off from the rest of the world and also dwarfed by the world. He can't control the world. He can't direct the world. He's just bubbling along in his world of fame, unable to actually influence anything. Or I could just be reading way too much into it.
Well, I mean, we all, every day, utilitarian item that we get into, and we're not really in control of it, and we are in control of driving it, but any journey you're not really in control of. Everything around you is dictating how that journey goes.
Yeah, yeah.
And one thinks of it as a shield against it, because you can listen to whatever music you want within it, or whatever radio station you want, but everything around you can spoil that. No matter how an advert always presents a car in countryside or going through hills, it never actually shows the reality of being stuck in a bloody traffic jam. Stuck with roadworks. And maybe there are frustrations. I mean, you could argue that a star complaining about being famous is something that is a real turn-off. But actually, a working class lad from Sheffield, living in Los Angeles, the experiences of fame. If you can articulate that, people will connect with it. And that's
I'm not sure. Yeah, but I'm not sure he actually wants to connect. That's the whole point about it. If you look at the cover, it's actually a question mark. It makes you think, and there's no answer that you can actually glean from it. And whereas when he started off, his lyrics about mainly characters in Sheffield, He was always a person who analysed everything
Yeah.
really succinctly and was right
Yes.
on the ball, and he knew everything. And
Mm.
he was the observer who knew everything. He was intelligent. He was,
Yeah.
almost above everybody else, really, even though he was part of that background. But
Mm.
since he became really famous, his lyrics are more about they're sort of rueful and bittersweet and puzzled and enigmatic. It's like
There's
he
an
hasn't really got
inevitable
answers.
disconnection, isn't there? That
Yeah, he
happens. It
hasn't got.
can't not.
He
It
hasn't.
can't
Yeah,
not happen.
he hasn't got answers anymore, Alex
No.
Turner. Basically, the Arctic Monkeys now are one gigantic question mark.
Yes. Still haven't found what I'm looking for. That you two when they end up singing that.
Yeah, but he's so smart. He's not looking anymore because he knows looking is probably pointless. So he's like this sort of like jaded, faded, aristocratic Brit who's living in the south of France in the 1930s,
Mm.
drinking a bit too much, having a great time technically in a
Mm.
slightly decadent way, but
Mm.
knowing that all this is quite pointless. That's the sort of feeling I'm still getting from Arctic Monkeys. But this one's so well done. It's a much nicer album to listen to than
But
Tranquility, Beethoven,
to draw
Casino.
people
It's
to draw
it's
people
also
into
it's lovely.
so that I mean so right so the musical side of that, but in terms of lyrics, they sound to me lyrics that would be kind of off-putting from that point of view.
Well, no,
I'm not saying we should have answers, but when people read novels or whatever, they kind of expect the artist to be the one who takes the outsider's position and does provide some form of answer or some suggestion as to what it all means.
well, not when you do very good observations. You can be successful artist in any vein if you're good at observing, and he's still
Yeah,
very good at observing. He's an intelligent writer, and
yeah.
even if he's enigmatic now, it's an enigma worth exploring.
Mm. And that's his reality now, probably, compared to understanding life in Sheffield on a very basic level at the age of 18. Very
Well,
different.
Jarvis got the same problem. Like, he wrote
Yes.
about Sheffield and about his own life and
Yeah.
background and
Yeah.
observational lyrics, which he was absolutely brilliant at. Then
Mm.
he made it really big and moved to London, and then suddenly
Mm.
you've got this hardcore
Yeah. All about trees.
followed by trees. This is what happens when intelligent working class lyricists become
Yeah.
super famous.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that interruption. Now, Graham, we're returning to films, and I think this is a fascinating thought, and I'm going to connect it as well with what I was going to look at, which is the new film Emily. But if we start off by talking about Clockwork Orange and The Sheltering Sky, and you contend that they're that rare things, films that are very faithful to the book, but does that really help? And I really like that question. It's almost like it's a futile thing. A film has to sustain itself above all. It feeds off a book, but it must work within its own medium.
Well, yeah, I mean, Blade Runner by Ridley Scott, based on the
Yeah,
Philip K. Dick book, Do
exactly.
Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
Yeah,
Train Spotting
yeah.
by Danny Boyle, based on the Irving Welsh book.
Mm,
Well, they're both great films. Blade Runner is fantastic, and so is
yeah.
Train Spotting.
Mm,
So I saw both films before I read the book. If you
mm,
read the book of Blade Runner and you read the book of Train Spotting, they're
mm.
virtually nothing like the
No,
film whatsoever.
exactly. Exactly.
But the great films. So I saw Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick,
Mm,
which was made in '71, and I saw The Sheltering Sky, which, if I remember correctly, was Bernardo Bertolucci,
mm,
and that was made about 1990. And I saw both the films before I read the books, so I assumed because they're both very good films, I thought, well, they'll be when I come to read the book of Clockwork Orange, the book of The Sheltering Sky, it'll be nothing like the film. But lo and behold, especially Clockwork Orange, is very similar and very faithful to Anthony Burgess's book. And The Sheltering Sky is very faithful and very similar to Paul Bowles' book. And I thought, wow, that's a real surprise. I didn't expect that.
mm.
But the problem is that I still think the books are better in both occasions, even though they're good films.
Released in 1990, Bernardo Bertolucci, correct. Golden Globe nomination. Yes.
But I
Well,
still think the books are better in both occasions, although these are good
which you
films.
would say by contrast with Blade Runner and with Train Spotting that you
Mm.
preferred the films.
Yeah, the films became great films because they ignored the books, and the films of Clockwork Orange and The Shelter Sky although they are great films, they're not as good as the books because they can't capture certain aspects. So with Clockwork Orange, the problem with Clockwork Orange is that Kubrick's stylishness and his visual panache and all the great interior design that he uses in
Yes.
fashion, that's not in the book at all. The book
No.
is resolutely focused on the main character of Alex, the young Drake, who's a violent criminal
Yeah.
who loves Beethoven. And so in the book, you're totally, even though the character's exactly the same as the film, you go along with everything he does and you never lose sight of that. In the film, it's so visually dynamic and striking. You don't identify throughout the film with Alex the Droog, played by Malcolm McDowell, because your mind's taken away by the striking visuals. The problem with Shelter in the Sky, the book compared to the film, is in the film you can't really tell, you can't express people's inner thinking in a movie without narration. And in the book, a lot of the book, Paul Bowles' Shelter in the Sky, is interior monologues, either of the male character, Port Moresby, or of his wife, Kate. And especially towards the end of the book, because they're an American couple who've been married for a while, and they get on so well they think they don't have to actually look after each other. But they're traveling across North Africa, and he gets ill, and they're with a companion who's a attractive young man who's totally untrustworthy with women, and so it's their marriage disintegrating almost by accident, and eventually the character who's played in the film by John Malkovich, Port Moresby, he dies of something like malaria, and
Yeah.
Kit's left on her own, and she goes totally to pieces and becomes,
Deborah Winger's
from being
character.
quite
Yeah.
quite a straight laced person, becomes like sexually promiscuous and hooks up with an Arab, and she's in the movie. You can see that she's obviously fallen apart after his death because she clearly loves him much more than she realized when he was alive. But in the book, it comes across much better because you know exactly what she's thinking, and in a film, you can't show exactly what someone's thinking.
I'm just looking here that in the film, rather than having a kind of internal monologue, there's a narrator role for Paul Bowles. So that
Well,
that instantly distance it from being internal monologues.
Well, you would say that, but he doesn't turn up that often. He's there at the beginning, he's there at the end. There's not much narration from Paul Bowles during the film because he was still alive when Bernardo Bertolucci made the film. So that isn't the case. It's not like Blade
No,
Runner, the movie, the original cut, where there's loads of narration. No,
that's
it's
right.
quite sparse.
Mm.
But Paul Bowles does turn up at the end of the film, and the one major change that they make in the film is there's a little speech by Port Moresby before he dies, and it's an existential book, and
Yeah.
Moresby's an existential character. In the movie's speech, from the middle of the book to the very end, they allow Paul Bowles to say it at the end of the movie, and I can see why, because it's the best bit of monologue in the whole film.
Mm.
It's a bit sort of like James Joyce, the Dubliners type
Yeah.
dialogue. And if we've got time, I'll read you out the little
I think we
passage.
have
It doesn't
time,
take long.
Graham.
So this is on
Definitely.
page
Yeah.
253 of the book. So this is what Port, John Malkovich's character, says, which in
Mm.
the film is said by the author Paul Bowles himself at the end. Port had said, "Death is always on the way, but the fact that you don't know when it will arrive seems to take away from the finiteness of life. It's that terrible precision that we hate so much, but because we don't know, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. Yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really.
Mm.
How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? Some afternoon that's so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 times more. Perhaps not even that.
Mm.
How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. And yet it all seems limitless." So Paul Bowles gets to say that at the end, and that's
Yeah.
because it's the best bit of writing in the whole book. But
It's
apart from that, it's almost a literal translation
yeah.
of the book and the film.
Yeah. Now I'm going to link in with the film that I saw, Emily, which is directorial debut for the actress Frances O'Connor, starring Emily Mackay from Sex Education as Emily Bronte. And in many ways, the starting point here is the book Wuthering Heights. And I say that's the starting point because so little is known of Emily. I mean, Charlotte Bronte wrote about her in some way, but it's has to be somewhat speculative. So what Frances O'Connor has done is drawn from Wuthering Heights the characteristics, primarily therefore, obviously, of Catherine Earnshaw within that, and to look at the character of Emily and why she was how she was. And it's done with, so it's a period piece, but as soon as you're in the parsonage at Haworth, you are not in Bridgerton type territory. You are not in Brideshead Revisited type territory. This is, as would Wuthering Heights would suggest, wind blasted heaths, and it doesn't do any of the pretty romance at all. This is a father who, played by Adrian Dunbar, shows utter favouritism to the wild and reckless Bramwell and to the somewhat spoilt Charlotte. And it's not an easy life. It's a life that's over for Emily at 30, dies of tuberculosis. And when I went to see Withering Looks, which was a spoof by the Wonderful Lip Service, basically it was revolving around them all dying, basically. So it's against that. And Emily stood out from the start as being the one that they wouldn't have called it mental health problems at the time.
No, not at all.
She would have been seen as weird at the time, odd. She was the one that the villagers in Haworth thought odd girl.
Well, women at the time were regarded as being more emotional than men,
yeah,
and less strong and less
not
together.
Sure that's changed on one level, Graham, but I think it's one where actually women have had to fight against that nonsense for years, haven't they? You know.
There was absolutely no attempt to understand women who had any problems of that nature whatsoever.
That's why it's interesting that it's a feminist track from that point of view. It is a woman writer understanding another woman writer, but it's also done with, I think, lovely wit to it, as well as all the darkness that's there and the use of masks as well within the piece. But I think there's a moment when Wuthering Heights is presented to Charlotte reads it, so it's presented as a complete piece, and Charlotte falls at her sister's floor and she's beating the floor with frustration because she knows that it's so much better than what she wrote, and that's beautifully done because the third sister, Anne, obviously just said, "Oh, I see you. I see she's read it." Then there's little touches like that, which this is sure it's imaginative, but it seems to me always, what I loved about the film, that it was always believable. So even the most speculative thing of all is the relationship, the sexual relationship that Emily has with the curate, Waitman, which there's no knowledge of whether that happened. But it entirely feels, as the Guardian review put it, it feels right that it's there. I found it the most emotionally draining film I've seen in a very, very long time. I was in tears.
Oh dear.
Most really? Of the film, I was in tears. I was exhausted by it as an experience.
What was so upsetting about it?
Because
in a good way.
I think you just care so much about her and about the circumstances in which she's living, but also about Bramwell and the way his life went.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.